Welcome and thank you for tuning in live on Facebook and YouTube. We certainly appreciate the efforts that are being made by our media ministry team headed by Reverend Grady Henderson, ably assisted by Ms. Marquita Fletcher and the trustees of Whitestone Missionary Baptist Church. I don't have to put a lot of emphasis on it. We know we're still in my opinion, in my view, it's not going to clear up anytime soon. So let's be very careful and do the things necessary to help fight this beast. For this week's lesson, February 13, lesson 87, the 11th one for the winter quarter. The subject for this week, February 11th, is Pilate, What is Truth? Of course, this is our winter quarter Sunday school expositor for December, January, February. And the Bible text, which Pilate, What is Truth? A powerful question taken from the text of the Bible text, St. John chapter 18, verses 28 through 40. The theme for the book of John, of the Gospel of John, is Christ in his deity. Theme for February 6th through the 27th, Triumph over Trial. The theme for the winter quarter is Triumph, and the golden text is taken from the 36th verse of the 18th chapter of St. John. And let me read it aloud. Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, then would my servants fight, that I should not be delivered to the Jews. But not hence." Now, what stands out to me about this particular verse, number 36, is what stands out to me about this verse. It is said best by Alston, John Albert Alston, our chief commentator, on page 148. Alston said, Jesus said, "My kingdom is not like your kingdom. My kingdom is not built on violence, on blood, on war." That's the way the kingdoms of this world function. My kingdom is not a world-like kingdom. Basically, Jesus says that I'm in charge of the spiritual world, and the spiritual world versus the human world, or the material world. Now, the lesson is divided into three sections. Gentiles, Christ that is, verses 28 through 32. Verse 28, fear of defilement is highlighted, and I'll get into the details of that soon. Verses 29 through 31, empty denunciation. Verse 32 is highlighted by fulfillment of the prophecy. Everything that occurred, everything that went on with Jesus in all of his ordeals, his journey, was all prophesied and had to be done in order to maintain divine truth. The second section, section 2, faith with the truth, verses 33 through 38 and the first half of verse 38. Verse 33 through 35, two-way interrogation, means Jesus was grilled. He was questioned over and over about basically the same thing. Verse 36 highlights a different kind of kingdom. That's what Jesus explains what we get in the golden text, or the key verse or memory verse. Verses 37 through 38, the second half of verse 38, I made a mistake. I put 30, well, yes, the first half of verse 38a. The challenge of truth. Verses through 40, the conclusion of the Bible text for the lesson this week. Section 3, truth discarded, done away with, cast off, said it was of no use. Verse 38b, the second half of verse 38 through 39, in attempt to reprieve, to regain. The last verse, repudiation of truth, verse 40. Now, key words defined. Barabbas, and some people pronounce it Barabbas, but Barabbas means son of a father. Repudiation means deny, reject, or cast off. Reprieve means to get relief from being blamed for something. Voracious means noisy, loud, shouting. Vociferous. Bluster, Bluster, violent, commotion, a lot of commotion, a lot of noise, loud noise. Truth, Truth, anything God says is fact, is truth. If it were not, or if it is not, we have no way of checking God. He's just too powerful. Integration, I've just mentioned that question. Mosaic law, rules given to Moses by God for teaching us. Explicit, explicit, explicit means clear-cut, specific, definite, to the direct point. Placate, Placate, to appease, to pacify, to soothe, to soften the blow, so to speak. Denunciation, a type of criticism or offering to blame or to censor, or a lot of cursing. Discard, I've mentioned that, to shed, to remove, to eliminate, to cast off. Malefactor means, in that context, or in this context, evildoer. That's why they call them malefactors. And defiled means to corrupt, to violate, upsetting. Judgment hall, in the context, within the text, it's used. That was, in that context, in that time, in that world of the text, governor's headquarters. It was the governor. It was Pilate's headquarters. It was the governor's decision-making place. Accusations, to make a charge against one or another. Condemned, to be found guilty, scolded, or punished. Now on page 145 of this adult Bible expositor, 4 important points are made by Austin to sum up the lesson before we even get started. If we have to stop for whatever reason within the next few minutes, I can say this about the lesson. If you notice in reading and the study of the text, in all due respects to our superintendent of Sunday school, Sister Carolyn Robinson Brooks, and to our superintendent emeritus, Brother William Baskin, and to all of our Sunday school teachers, to Sunday school teachers everywhere, whether you're in California, New Orleans, or Chicago, or Detroit, New York, or up in Nashville, or Louisville, Kentucky, or down in Texas, or Baton Rouge, or Vicksburg, or down in Alabama, it does not matter. But 4 points are made by Austin. First, justice should be a concern for all people in every generation, in every age, in every era. Justice was important, or was a concern for people then, and justice is a concern for all people in this 21st century. The second point, as Solomon said, quote from Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse 9, there is no new thing under the sun. Injustice has affected people always. In some form or another, some people or some person or someone has always been drastically affected or negatively affected by injustice. Number 3, nobody experienced injustice worse than Jesus did. And the fourth and final point, the injustice Christ encountered became a tool in the hand of the overall plan of God. Now on page 149, there are 10 questions that need answers. 10 questions with answers on page 149. Number one, what is the hall of judgment? That's in verse 28 of the text. According to Alston, it was the praetorium for the governor or his residence, page 146. Number two, why did the Jews refuse to enter the hall of judgment? Why did the Jews refuse to enter the hall of judgment? Answer, they wanted to avoid ceremonial defilement or corruption of the place. They felt that they were unclean, they were unworthy to walk in the judgment hall, page 146. Number three, why did the Jewish authorities need to take Jesus to Pilate? Well, answer, because the governor alone had the legal power of life or death over criminals. Page 146. What is a malefactor? I've already covered that. The answer is an evildoer. You see it in verse 30 of the text. Page 147. Number 5. For what other reason was it important that Christ be turned over to the Romans? Short answer. In order for all these prophecies to be fulfilled, the Jews needed to hand Christ over to the Romans for crucifixion. Page 147. Now, number 6. What was Pilate's initial response to the Jewish leaders' demand? A short answer. Pilate told them to deal with Christ on their own. Page 147. Number 7. What accusation against Jesus did the Jewish leaders bring that caught Pilate's attention? Short answer. Clearly, they were accusing Christ of being a, I'm sorry, I misspelled that word. They were accusing Christ of being a political insurrectionist. Kind of like the same things that we had on January 6, 2021 in the United States Capitol. They were accusing Christ of being a political insurrectionist. That should be being, B-E-I-N-G. And therefore a threat to Roman authority. Look at pages 145 and 148. Number 8. What did Jesus mean by saying that his kingdom is not of this world? Verse 36, which is the golden text. Matter of fact, I've already elaborated on that some earlier. Short answer. Jesus said, my kingdom is not of this world. Well, Christ declared that his kingdom was from another place or realm in creation. It is a heavenly kingdom, spiritual in nature, and incomprehensible to the fallen human mind. Unless we're in Christ, unless we are born again, there's no way to comprehend what Jesus was and is saying. Page 148. Number 9. What did Pilate mean by his response? What is truth? What is truth? Verse 38. Over the ages, over the centuries, most commentators, most theologians, most Bible scholars have been uncertain as what Pilate's question meant. Well, he really didn't understand in the spiritual sense that Jesus was speaking. That's my take on that. But most generally think he was cynical, meaning he was doubtful of Christ and who he said he was. He was skeptical. He was skeptical of Christ. He was kind of like poking fun at him because he didn't really believe that Christ was the Messiah, the Son of God. Didn't really believe in Christ at all, or he was trying to straddle the fence. He wanted to work with everybody. Page 148. Who, number 10, who was Barabbas or Barabbas? Well, short answer. Barabbas or Barabbas was a notorious criminal who was convinced or a convicted insurrectionist. He had already been caught trying to overthrow the government. page 149. A few high points or key quotes that might be worth our consideration for our spiritual meditational moments. First, the high point of the entire lesson. Of all these verses that we've studied, that you have read or that you will read, that you're listening to now, the high point in my view is, in this lesson, to me, is that folks back then, like now, are blinded or were blinded to the truth of God, not unlike today at all. Alston stresses the three major goals of this lesson text. There are three important goals, three things we want together. We want to take home, we want to internalize, put in our minds, implant in our mind, embed in our spirits. First, we are to be clear that Jesus was tried by the Roman authorities to fulfill the prophecy. Second, you and I are to recognize Christ as a king of divine beginning, origin, bearing witness to the truth. Third, you and I, we are to submit to the rule of Christ over lives and to know that objective knowledge is possible through a relationship with Christ, page 150. Dr. Carter, on page 152 of this book, said something that stands out in my mind. Carter said, the hearts of those who follow Christ have been open to the truth. If we are born again, if we are disciples of Christ, if we believe in Christ and we trust him, we have had our minds open to the spiritual world. Study verses 36 and 37. Verse 38, according to Alston, is a reminder of a hymn by a man by the name of A.B. Simpson. As a matter of fact, I quoted him on last week's sermon. A.B. Simpson wrote, Jesus is standing in Pilate's hall, friendless, forsaken, betrayed by all, hearken. What meaneth the sudden call? What will you do with Jesus? What will you do with Jesus? He repeats the question. Neutral cannot be. Someday our heart will be asking, what will he do with me? Page 152. Dr. Gifford had something wonderful to say on page 153. Gifford said, Christians engage in spiritual warfare. We do things like telling the truth, living righteously, means living in Christ, walking with Christ, preaching the gospel, trusting in God, loving our enemies, persevering through trial, and praying in the Spirit, based on Ephesians chapter 6, verse 15 through 18. Now, one last, on page 157, brings to my mind, or evokes or stirs up in my mind, what is important to us, or should be as it relates to following the risen Christ. On page 157, Winter says, teachers, we as teachers, should explain the example of Barabbas and Jesus in regard to our own sin. If we don't see things like Christ, we're off base. And that's hard to do, to see things as to foolishness. As teachers, we need to visit the idea that death means not returning. Once we are dead, we don't come back here as we left. And that's a chilling thought, but it's true. We need to visit the idea that death means not returning, highlighting that for Jesus alone, that is not the case, because he came back as he left. Finally, children, especially those between, say, 3, 2.5, or 2 years old, 3, 4, 5, perhaps up to as much as 7, and in some cases, depending on the kid or the child, 8. Children should know, children in that age bracket especially, should know that, and so do we, 95. Children should know that Christ committed no crime, not just no crime worthy of death. He committed no kind of crime. God bless you, and I hope you would join us at 11 o'clock worship.